Let's talk about chain discounts. Instead of offering a 25% trade discount, which we could also say as a single discount, in other words, it's one number, 25%. Instead of offering that one number, some manufacturers or some wholesalers offer us a chain discount, let's say 10, 7, 5. 10/7/5. What that means is this. That means we get 10% off the list, then we get an additional 7% off of what was left, then we get an additional 5% off of what was left after that. Now, why would somebody do it that way? Well, it's not just to confuse us. It's not to make us think we're getting a 10 plus 7 plus 5 equals 22% discount, because we're not, and everybody knows we're not. What they do is they use this kind of discounting to make their prices more flexible. In other words, they might say everyone gets this 10% discount, okay, because you're our dealer. And let's say if you order 100 or more in quantity, you get an additional 7% off of what was left. And let's say furthermore, we've been having problems selling this product in Arkansas, so if you're an Arkansas dealer and you order 100 or more, you'll get the 10%, then you'll get 7% off that, then you'll get an additional 5% off that, because we want you to buy more stuff, all right? So we're going to give you more of a discount. That way, they can print their catalogs or put their stuff on their website and just say, here's the list price, and all I have to do is email people a new chain discount page every week or whatever. So it makes their pricing more flexible. Now, let's see how this works. Let's say there were a $400 list, and let's say we got all three of those chain discounts. If you have how many of you have a simple calculator? Okay. Let's do it the simple calculator way, and then I'll show you the other way, which we need to know anyway. Let's take 400 minus 10%. So if we knock 10% off 400, we should get 360. Does that sound right? Now let's knock 7% off of that. And I'm not doing that in my head, so 334.8. Does that sound right to everybody? 334.80. And now let's knock an additional 5% off that. 318.06. Thank you. And if it did not come out even, we would round it to the nearest penny. Okay. Anytime we're doing financial things, you never want to round anything until you write down your final answer. But normally we go to 2 decimal places. All right, so 318.06, that would be our net price. All right, after those 3 discounts. Now, let's look at another way of looking at it. Instead of taking 10% of that, $40, and subtracting it, what could we multiply 400 by to get 960? We could multiply it by 90%, couldn't we? If we're saving 10%, we're spending 90%. So everybody punch in 400 times 90%, or if you have a scientific calculator, 400 times 0.9 equals. Some calculators, they'll let you use the percentage and they'll calculate it immediately. Some you have to press the equals after. Some you need to change it to a decimal. Does everybody get 360 for that? Now let's multiply that. If we're saving 7%, we would be spending 100 minus 7, which is 93%, isn't it? So 400 times 90% times 93%, that ought to give us this number. Does it? All right. And now our last one, if we're saving 5%, how much are we spending? We're spending 95%, aren't we? We're spending 100 minus the savings. So if we say 400 times 90% times 93% times 95%, that should give us this 318.06. Now, these numbers are called the complements of these three discount rates. The complement of 10% is 100 minus 10%, 90%. The complement of 7 is 100 minus 7, 93. The complement of 5% is 100 minus 5%, 95%. Now, what if we bought a bunch of items from this company and they had different list prices? Well, here's a $400 list price. We'd say, okay, that's how much I'm paying for that. If we had a $700 list price, we'd put it here and do the same thing. Well, if we had 30 of these to do, we'd figure out pretty quickly that, you know, when you multiply numbers, it doesn't matter what order you multiply them in, does it? We could figure out what this number is first, and then just multiply it times our list price, and we'd be done. Now, when we do that, we have to use the decimal equivalents, okay? So, the decimal equivalent of 90%, here's what we do basically when we see a chain discount. We subtract each one of those things from 100% and we express it as a decimal. So 90% as a decimal is what? 0.9, and 93% is 0.93, and 95% is 0.95. So whether you have a simple calculator or a scientific calculator, punch in 0.9 times 0.93 times 0.95 equals. And that'll be a decimal. It'll have a lot of decimal places, and we do not round this thing off.